Dateline, Washington. The devil, as they say, is in the details, and, on May 9, according to the official paperwork of a pandemic that had persisted for 3 years, HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra had announced that as of May 11, based upon current COVID-19 trends, the Federal Public Health Emergency, PHE, for COVID-19, declared under Section 319 of the Public Health Service Act, would expire at the end of the day on May 11, even though many questions remain unanswered. The devil, as they say, is in the details. Just as, long before March 11, 2020, when officials at the WHO had with Situation Report number 51, after assessing this outbreak around the clock, expressing deep concern about both by the alarming levels of spread and severity, and by the alarming levels of inaction, made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic, issued the first of what would become multiple, periodic operational reports, announcing on January 21, 2020, 11 days after the first fatality, that, on 31 December 2019, the WHO China Country Office was informed of cases of pneumonia unknown etiology, unknown cause, detected in Wuhan City, Hubei Province of China, and from December 31, 2019 through January 3, 2020, a total of 44 case patients with pneumonia of unknown etiology were reported to WHO by the national authorities in China. The devil, as they say, is in the details. And, for official purposes, that was how a pandemic had begun, on the world stage, as teams from the WHO's China and Pacific regional offices had been dispatched to the city of Wuhan. The devil, as they say, is in the details. In China, for official purposes, the pandemic had begun on December 31, 2019, when the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission, China, reported a cluster of cases of pneumonia in Wuhan, Hubei Province, and the very next day, already the WHO had begun its work in China, setting up the IMST, Incident Management Support Team, across the 3 levels of the organization, headquarters, regional headquarters and country level, putting the organization on an emergency footing for dealing with the outbreak. Indicating to at least some intelligence analysts that a train had already left the station, for official business purposes, because for unexplained reasons, what had at that point been only identified as about 15 cases of an as of yet non-lethal, with a cluster of cases associated with a venue the size of 9 American football fields, in a city with a population larger than the entire state of Virginia, had been receiving a lot of official government and non-government organization attention. The devil, as they say, is in the details. On January 4, 2020, even the WHO had admitted on social media that there was only a small cluster of pneumonia cases, with no deaths, in Wuhan, Hubei Province, but the very next day, January 5, 2020, the WHO published its very first disease outbreak news on the new virus. This is a flagship technical publication to the scientific and public health community as well as global media. It contained a risk assessment and advice, and reported on what China had told the organization about the status of patients and the public health response on the cluster of pneumonia cases in Wuhan. The devil, as they say, is in the details. And by January 12, 2020, one day before the first imported case being reported in Thailand and the first fatality reported in China had shared the genetic sequence of the novel coronavirus for countries to use in developing specific diagnostic kits. The devil, as they say, is in the details. The first imported cases in Japan would not be reported until January 15, 2020, and in South Korea, on January 20, 2020, appearing at least to be finding some regional geographic spread. The devil, as they say, is in the details. Unlike an epidemic, defined in reference to mortality rate in proportion to a given population, the term pandemic is ambiguous and amorphous, but, generally, something described as pandemic, such as the phrase, pandemic in proportion, by definition, is simply anything occurring over a wide geographic area, such as multiple countries or continents, and typically affecting a significant proportion of the population, and is merely something, anything at all, characterized by very widespread growth or extent, and when used as a noun, a pandemic refers to an outbreak of a disease that occurs over a wide geographic area, such as multiple countries or continents, and typically affects a significant proportion of the population. And, historically, like epidemics, pandemics have been historically associated with fear, confusion and despair, as well as economic, social and political disruption. But the devil, as they say, is in the details. Yet, confronted with suddenly a reality, no longer abstract or clouded as esoteric, beyond the operational definition of a pandemic, very early on, more as participants, not movers or shakers, more as followers and not as leaders, missing the forest through the trees, even some atheists began to ponder greater existential questions, turning to prayer, while communities of faith attempted to find meaning and relevance considering words like stewardship, in lieu of fellowship, and the more science-minded resorted to psychology, addressing a new sense of vulnerability, the lost faith addressed by the American president that government was still able to do the big things, the things that mattered, since COVID-19 had attacked our understanding of how governments protect people, unsettling the regular rhythm of routine life that had in previous years helped us find consistency and predictability. But the devil, as they say, is in the details. COVID-19, one psychologist suggested, had attacked our plans and aspirations for the future, our dream vacations and travel explorations, key rites of passage we were looking forward to, whether that meant graduation, athletic goals we'd been training toward for months, the big dance, birthdays, moving out on one's own, starting a new business, or even planning for the next quarter of existing businesses, and stunted the importance of our sense of mission to give us strength and motivation. But the devil, as they say, is in the details. COVID-19 had attacked our sense of worth and place in the world, taken away our jobs, our favorite restaurants, our contact with people who make us feel loved and that we belong. It had taken away those random moments of recognition that arise from idle chit-chat with coworkers, neighbors, checkout clerks, receptionists, postal workers, and 100 other significant social touches that season our days and give us the assurance that we matter. But the devil, as they say, is in the details. And, with the swiftness that it had suddenly emerged, after December 2019, sweeping everything in its path, at the close of the business day on May 11th, by proclamation by the President and executive agencies, it was, for official purposes, over, finished, and done. Life goes on. But yet, the devil, as they say, is in the details. Still, at least some Republican leaders in Congress, perhaps motivated for political reasons, with another upcoming presidential election, as had been the backdrop for the beginning of the pandemic, continue to fan the flames of controversy, pointing to smoking gun emails, confessions and admissions, while getting no closer than before to the solution or resolving the question exactly how, and for what reason, this novel coronavirus of an etiology described as quite singular had began, while some have resolved, perhaps just as only an alibi defense, have suggested that even science may never know either the alleged zoonotic source or laboratory origin. And the devil, as they say, is in the details. However, in one uncovered story in the press accounts, on March 23, 2021, officials at the White House had received what may have at first to have appeared as a routine request for documents under the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, which sent the White House into lockdown and a panic that, by May 26, 2021, would find even the president tasking elements of the intelligence community. And, 2 years and 3 litigations later, on July 3, a fugitive White House had finally surrendered, after a threat had been issued to dispatch officers from the United States Marshals to the White House to serve process and deliver a summons and civil complaint on a matter brought to the Federal District Court in Washington. The devil, as they say, is in the details. The White House had only 21 days to respond, which will expire on July 24, at which time, for the first time, perhaps Americans and the world will find an official answer, on paper, as to what found the most powerful government leader in the world in fear of giving an answer to a simple question, whether certain metrics for COVID-19 were classified information, or, in the alternative, what lawful justification it might have for evading providing a response to this question for over 2 years. The devil, as they say, is in the details. Under the FOIA, there is a presumption for disclosure, and any requester is entitled to immediate injunctive relief when any agency refuses to provide a response to a FOIA request, which quite clearly has not yet occurred through 3 successive litigation. The devil, as they say, is in the details. Under the FOIA, there is a presumption for disclosure, but any agency has at least 9 possible reasons to present to exempt disclosure of certain government information and documents, which, quite clearly, has not yet occurred, even through 3 successive litigations. The devil, as they say, is in the details. However, under Executive Order 12958, signed by President Clinton in April 1995, information that may be exempted from disclosure because it is classified, can only be classified if it is owned or controlled by the government, and, in this case, now docketed for hearing on July 26 at the Federal District Court in Washington, if the information requested pertaining to standard epidemiological metrics for COVID-19 are, in fact, classified information, by operation of law. The novel coronavirus could only have found its origins in a laboratory, no science, confessions, admissions or smoking gun emails required. The devil, as they say, is in the details. That is the news for now in Washington, and we shall keep you posted on this developing story.
This message was approved by Major Mike Webb, Honest.